Welcome to Peaceful Night Whispers. Today, we uncover the fascinating historical truth behind the most famous meals served during biblical times. When we imagine the Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci's iconic Renaissance painting usually comes to mind with its grand wooden table. However, this beautiful artwork is historically inaccurate. Jesus and his disciples definitely did not sit on wooden chairs like European nobles. In ancient Judea, people actually reclined comfortably on soft floor cushions around a low, U-shaped wooden table known as a triclinium. Reclining on their left sides allowed diners to eat with their right hands, fostering a deeply intimate and relaxed communal atmosphere. This seating arrangement meant that individuals were physically close to one another, making deep conversations and shared emotions much more natural. The host would occupy a prominent position, while the most honored guest reclined directly next to him during the special feast. Now, let us explore the actual food they consumed. Their daily diet was heavily dependent on the famous Mediterranean agricultural triad. This essential nutritional triad consisted of three main pillars: freshly baked bread, rich olive oil, and locally produced fermented grape wine. Together, these three staple items provided approximately 70 to 80% of the daily caloric intake for an average working person. Bread was not just a simple side dish, it was the absolute center of every meal and the main source of energy. In fact, the ancient language often used the word for bread as a general synonym for food or a complete meal. However, the type of grain used to bake the bread revealed a great deal about a family's wealth and social status. Barley bread was the most common food for the poor because it was significantly cheaper and much easier to grow everywhere. It was coarse, heavy, and often difficult to chew, but it provided the necessary sustenance for farmers and poor laborers daily. On the other hand, fine wheat bread was a luxurious item reserved exclusively for the wealthy elite and special holiday celebrations. Wheat flour produced a softer, lighter loaf that was highly prized and considered a true blessing from the heavens above them. Olive oil was another crucial component of their diet, serving multiple purposes beyond just cooking and flavoring their daily rustic meals. It was used for lighting lamps, healing wounds, and anointing guests, making it a truly versatile and sacred everyday household necessity. Wine was the standard daily beverage, as plain water was often unsafe to drink due to the lack of purification systems. The wine was typically diluted with water to reduce its alcoholic strength, allowing people to drink it safely throughout the day. When it came to protein, fish was the most popular and accessible choice, especially for those living near the Galilee region. The Sea of Galilee provided an abundant supply of fresh fish, which supported a thriving local fishing industry during biblical times. One of the most famous catches was the St. Peter's fish, a type of tilapia that remains popular in Israel today. Fishermen would cast their large nets into the freshwater lake, hoping for a bountiful catch to feed their families and communities. Since refrigeration did not exist, much of the fish was heavily salted and dried in the hot sun for long preservation. Small salted sardines were a common staple, easily transported across long distances and traded in bustling markets throughout the ancient empire. These preserved fish provided essential nutrients and a strong, savory flavor that perfectly complemented the plain taste of their daily bread. Meat, however, was incredibly rare for the average person. It was certainly not something they consumed on a regular daily basis. Animals like sheep, goats, and cattle were far too valuable alive, as they continuously provided milk, warm wool, and agricultural labor. Therefore, slaughtering a healthy animal was a significant economic sacrifice that was only justified for major religious festivals or grand weddings. During these rare festive occasions, the entire village would gather to share the roasted meat, ensuring that absolutely nothing was wasted. The consumption of food was strictly governed by complex dietary laws known as kosher, which shaped the distinct Jewish cultural identity. These ancient rules explicitly forbade the eating of pork, shellfish, and certain other animals considered ritually unclean by the religious authorities. Furthermore, the laws prohibited the mixing of meat and dairy products in the same meal, a practice still strictly followed today. Following these dietary restrictions was not merely about physical health, it was a profound spiritual commitment and a mark of holiness. It served as a constant daily reminder of their unique covenant with God and beautifully distinguished them from neighboring pagan nations. Eating was a highly sacred act. Washing hands before a meal was a mandatory ritual of purification, not just basic hygiene. The act of breaking bread held immense symbolic significance. It represented the sharing of life, deep mutual trust, and spiritual unity. The head of the household would take the loaf, pronounce a blessing of gratitude, and then tear pieces for everyone present. This beautiful gesture transformed a simple gathering into a meaningful communion, binding the participants together in a shared covenant of peace. Now, let us return to that fateful evening of the Last Supper, an event filled with profound tension and deep emotion. Jesus and his 12 disciples were gathered in a dimly lit upper room to celebrate the sacred Passover meal together peacefully. They were reclining on cushions around a low triclinium table, their faces illuminated by the warm, flickering glow of oil lamps. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken sorrow, as Jesus knew that his time on earth was rapidly drawing to an end. During the meal, Jesus took the unleavened bread, offered a heartfelt blessing, broke it, and handed it to his beloved disciples. He told them that this bread represented his own body, which would soon be broken for the ultimate salvation of humanity. Then he took the cup of red wine, declaring it to be his blood, poured out to establish a new covenant. This profound moment forever changed the meaning of the Passover meal, establishing the holy sacrament of communion for future Christian generations. Yet, amidst this beautiful display of divine love, a dark shadow of betrayal loomed quietly over the intimate dining room table. Jesus suddenly announced that one of the men eating with him would soon betray him to the hostile religious authorities outside. The disciples were immediately struck with deep sorrow and confusion, each one anxiously asking if they were the guilty traitor mentioned. In a deeply symbolic and often misunderstood gesture, Jesus dipped a piece of bread into the communal dish of bitter herbs. This dipped bread, known as the sop, was then gently handed directly to Judas Iscariot, who was reclining very close by. In Middle Eastern culture, giving the sop to a guest was actually a profound gesture of supreme honor and intimate friendship. It was typically reserved for the most esteemed person at the table, a sign of the host's special favor and respect. Therefore, by offering the sop to Judas, Jesus was not merely pointing out the traitor to the rest of the disciples. He was making one final, heartbreaking appeal of absolute love and boundless grace to the very man plotting his imminent downfall. It was a powerful demonstration that his divine love extended even to his enemies, offering forgiveness until the very last moment. Tragically, Judas accepted the honored morsel but firmly rejected the love behind it, allowing darkness to completely consume his troubled heart. He immediately left the warm fellowship of the upper room, stepping out into the cold, unforgiving night to complete his betrayal. The Last Supper was not a grand banquet in a majestic Renaissance hall, but an intimate, emotionally charged gathering of friends. Understanding the historical context of this meal brings a profound new depth to the timeless story of faith, sacrifice, and redemption. The humble setting, the simple food, and the cultural customs all played a vital role in conveying deeply profound spiritual truths. The coarse bread reminded them of their daily dependence on God's provision and the shared struggles of their challenging earthly existence. The wine symbolized joy, celebration, and ultimately, the precious blood that would be willingly shed for the forgiveness of human sins. The act of reclining together highlighted their equality and intimate brotherhood, breaking down social barriers that often divided the ancient world. Even the strict dietary laws they followed served as a powerful testament to their unwavering dedication to a holy, set-apart lifestyle. As we reflect on these historical details, the iconic image painted by Leonardo da Vinci slowly fades into a different reality. We see a much more relatable and authentic scene, a group of ordinary men sharing a simple meal with their master. This historical reality does not diminish the sacredness of the event, rather, it makes the story much more accessible and deeply human. It reminds us that the divine often meets us in the most ordinary, everyday moments of our simple, beautifully flawed lives. Whether it is a piece of rough barley bread or a cup of diluted wine, God uses the ordinary to perform miracles. The meals of biblical times were never just about physical nourishment, they were profound expressions of faith, community, and divine love. Every single ingredient, from the crushed olives to the salted fish, carried a rich tapestry of cultural and deep spiritual meaning. The olive tree itself was a powerful symbol of peace, enduring strength, and the eternal light of God shining upon humanity. Harvesting the olives was a laborious communal effort, bringing families together to carefully press the valuable oil for the entire year. The vineyards required constant, meticulous care, reflecting the biblical metaphor of God as the devoted caretaker of his chosen human flock. Crushing the grapes to produce wine mirrored the suffering and ultimate triumph of the human spirit through faith and divine grace. The fishermen casting their nets into the unpredictable sea represented the brave leap of faith required to follow a higher calling. Their sun-baked skin and calloused hands told the silent story of hard labor, quiet resilience, and unwavering hope for better tomorrows. The rare enjoyment of roasted meat during festivals was a joyful anticipation of the ultimate heavenly banquet promised in sacred scriptures. It was a fleeting taste of eternal paradise, where hunger and sorrow would be permanently banished from the human earthly experience. The Kosher Laws, though seemingly restrictive, provided a comforting rhythm and divine structure to their chaotic, unpredictable daily lives and routines. They transformed the mundane necessity of eating into a mindful, deliberate act of worship and constant gratitude toward their loving Creator. The ritual washing of hands was a physical manifestation of their deep internal desire for spiritual purity and complete moral cleanliness. The shared loaf of bread was a tangible reminder that they were all interconnected members of one single, unified spiritual family. Tearing the bread apart did not divide them, instead, sharing those broken pieces miraculously bound their souls closer together in unity. This is the beautiful paradox of the communion table: through brokenness, we find complete wholeness, deep healing, and eternal spiritual connection. The Last Supper perfectly encapsulated all these profound cultural elements, elevating them to a completely unprecedented and magnificent new spiritual level. Jesus took the familiar traditions of his people and infused them with a radical, world-changing message of sacrificial love and redemption. He redefined the Passover lamb, offering himself as the ultimate, unblemished sacrifice to permanently liberate humanity from the heavy chains of sin. He transformed the bitter herbs of slavery into a stark reminder of the bitter cost of genuine freedom and eternal salvation. And in his final, poignant interaction with Judas, he vividly demonstrated that divine grace is always extended, even to the undeserving. The sop of honor was a silent, tearful plea for the traitor to turn back from the destructive edge of darkness. It showed that God's love is never forceful, it is a gentle, open invitation that each individual must freely choose to accept. As we visualize this authentic historical scene, we are invited to take our own place at that low, U-shaped wooden table. We are asked to recline among the flawed, fearful disciples and experience the overwhelming, unconditional love of the Master sitting nearby. We are challenged to look past the grand, idealized Renaissance paintings and embrace the raw, beautiful reality of the biblical narrative. The truth is far more compelling than the myth. It speaks directly to our shared human experience of hunger, fellowship, and longing. It reminds us that true greatness is not found in sitting on elevated thrones, but in humbly serving others at the table. Jesus washing the feet of his disciples before the meal perfectly illustrated this revolutionary concept of servant leadership and profound humility. He took on the role of the lowest servant, proving that genuine love requires incredibly selfless action and deep personal sacrifice. This radical humility shocked his followers, challenging their preconceived notions of power, authority, and the true nature of the coming kingdom. The meals of the Bible were masterclasses in theology, taught not in grand temples, but around simple, dusty tables in humble homes. They taught that everyone, regardless of their social standing or past mistakes, is warmly welcome to partake in God's abundant grace. The poor laborer eating hard barley bread and the wealthy merchant enjoying fine wheat were completely equal in the eyes of God. The shared meal was a powerful equalizer, a sacred space where earthly hierarchies dissolved into a beautiful, harmonious fellowship of believers. This inclusive vision of community remains one of the most enduring and deeply inspiring legacies of the early Christian historical movement. It challenges us today to examine our own modern tables and ask ourselves who we are inviting to share our daily bread. Are we building exclusive walls, or are we extending the warm sop of friendship and honor to those who desperately need it? The historical reality of the Last Supper is a timeless, urgent call to practice radical hospitality, deep empathy, and boundless, unconditional love. It urges us to look beyond superficial differences and recognize the inherent divine dignity resting quietly within every single human being. As we study the ancient Mediterranean diet, we also discover a profound respect for the natural world and its seasonal, rhythmic cycles. The people of biblical times intimately understood that their very survival depended entirely on the delicate balance of sun, rain, and soil. Every harvest was viewed as a miraculous gift, prompting joyous festivals of thanksgiving and deep, heartfelt gratitude to the generous Creator. This deep connection to the earth stands in sharp contrast to our modern, disconnected relationship with the highly processed food we consume. Rediscovering the simplicity of the biblical meal can inspire us to adopt a more mindful, sustainable, and spiritually grounded approach to eating. It encourages us to slow down, savor each bite, and truly appreciate the immense labor and love that brings food to us. The story of the biblical meal is, ultimately, a beautiful story about the enduring, unbreakable connection between the physical and spiritual realms. It demonstrates that God cares deeply about our physical needs, while simultaneously using them to satisfy our profound, unquenchable spiritual hunger. The bread sustains our fragile bodies, but the shared love and sacred communion nourish our eternal souls for the long journey ahead. By understanding the historical truth of these ancient meals, we unlock a deeper, richer appreciation for the sacred scriptures we hold dear. We can vividly see the vibrant colors, smell the fragrant spices, and feel the profound emotional weight of those transformative historical moments. The Last Supper was a beautifully real event, featuring real people, eating real food, and experiencing the most profound love ever known. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey back in time to uncover the hidden historical realities of the biblical world. We hope this exploration has enlightened you. Please subscribe Peaceful Night Whispers for more deep historical dives. See you next time, friends.